Roll! Aye, aye, sir!
The music of the Seahawk, a 1940 film that starred Errol Flynn at his swashbuckling best. The composer of that rousing prelude was the Austrian-born Erich Wolfgang Korngold, and while he is perhaps best known today for the rich and lyrical music he wrote for movies of the 30s and 40s, he also composed some wonderful music for the concert hall and the opera stage, and he led one of the most interesting and dramatic lives of all 20th century composers. Erich Wolfgang Korngold was one of the most important and influential composers in the history of Hollywood. He was the first composer of genuine stature to create music for American commercial films. His work set a new standard for other composers to follow, and while he composed complete scores for just 16 films, that music has stood the test of time. Korngold was born in May 1897 in Brunn, then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He spent much of his early life in Vienna, where his father Julius was the leading music critic in the German-speaking press. Erich was a musical prodigy who was improvising at the piano by the age of 7, pronounced a genius by Mahler at the age of 9, wrote a ballet at 11, and saw 2 of his one-act operas produced at the age of 18. Throughout the 1920s and the early 30s, Korngold continued to compose chamber works, lieder, even arrangements of Johann Strauss works for the theater. It was in the theater that he met the impresario Max Reinhardt, and that provided the impetus to his Hollywood career. In 1934, Reinhardt staged Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream at the Hollywood Bowl, with music from the Mendelssohn score and the 18-year-old Olivia de Havilland as Hermia, and another young teen, Mickey Rooney, as Puck. Warner Brothers approached Reinhardt to make a film version, which he agreed to. But he said the only composer he would trust to adapt the Mendelssohn for the screen would be his old collaborator from Vienna, Erich Wolfgang Korngold. Warner Brothers was so pleased with the outcome of A Midsummer Night's Dream that the studio asked Korngold to consider writing original music for some of their lavish period pictures. Korngold accepted. He felt that this was an exciting new medium. It was an outlet for his romantic sensibility, the kind of emotional and dramatic music that he loved to write and which had been so successful in his operas in Europe. Said Korngold, "It is not true that the cinema places a restraint on musical expression. Music is music, whether it is for the stage, rostrum, or cinema."
He was really the first to use the leitmotif style, where everyone in the film had a theme, and these were dramatically intertwined. I don't know if the director came on the stage when he recorded Captain Blood, but if he did, their eyes must have been wide open because nobody's ever heard of a symphonic main title like that before.
In 1936, Korngold found himself fascinated by another one of Warner Brothers' grand historical epics, based on a popular novel called Anthony Adverse. Frederick March played the title character, an adventurer in 19th century Europe who travels to Cuba and Africa.
You beast. You savage.
The score for Anthony Adverse won Korngold his first Academy Award. Sort of. Actually, in 1936, Oscar rules demanded that the award for original score be given to the studio music department. In this case, that meant Leo Forbstein, the head of the Warner Brothers music department, but not a composer, accepted the award. It was such an embarrassment, this world-famous composer creating extraordinary scores for an American film studio, and yet not entitled to the award for his own music, that the Motion Picture Academy subsequently changed its rules to ensure the composer actually received the honor. A year later, world events intervened in Korngold's life, and a movie score saved him and his family from certain death. Korngold, then in the midst of writing his next opera, Die Catherine, returned to LA in February 1938 with his wife and son George. After an initial screening, he turned the offer down flat. As he wrote to producer Hal Wallace, "I am a musician of the heart, of passions and psychology. I'm not a musical illustrator for a 90% action picture."
Good swordsmen, good archers, good fighters. Men, if you're willing to fight for our people, I want you. Are you with me?
The score for The Adventures of Robin Hood captured a second Academy Award for Erich Wolfgang Korngold, and this time he was able to accept it in person. Now exiled to America, his music banned by the Nazis in Europe, and with movies his primary source of employment, Korngold bought a house in Toluca Lake, just a 10-minute walk from the studio. He immersed himself in Warner Brothers pictures, scoring costume dramas and Bette Davis films, 16 in all between 1935 and 1946. His process was unlike any composer before or since. Once again, the composer's son, George Korngold.
The normal way a composer composes for a film is that the music editor prepares timing sheets for him. First, it's decided where music is going to be played in the film, and then those places are described down to a third of a second, exactly what happens. Warner Brothers provided for him a private projection room, where he went usually in the evenings, and he would run the film a reel at a time, and just compose to the running film. And he had a fantastic sense of timing. When he went to record, most composers used what they call click tracks. It's a metronome that you hear on an earphone and that the orchestra hears on the earphone too, which keeps you absolutely in sync with the picture. You don't really need a conductor. He never could do that. I mean, he was able to conduct, and when he conducted to the running picture, like they all did, and he accompanied the dialogue the way he had written it in this room. Certainly he had a cue to start, so it would start at the right place, and he also knew where to end. But there were very few inner cues, and if so, it was just a flash on the film to show him that he was all right.
You'll never lose me.
Strange. In all the weeks we've been together, we've never been so close.
Korngold's last original film score was for a 1946 melodrama called Deception, about a musical love triangle. An arrogant composer-conductor played by Claude Rains, his mistress, a pianist played by Bette Davis, and a cellist, Davis's former lover, played by Paul Henreid.
I'm yours, aren't I?
If it isn't too good to be true.
For the climax of Deception, Korngold composed a 7-minute single-movement cello concerto he later expanded for concert performance. Erich Wolfgang Korngold died in November 1957. He was 60 years old. He died thinking he had been forgotten. In 1972, however, all that changed when RCA Victor released an album of superbly performed excerpts from his film scores. In a matter of months, it was the best-selling classical album in the country. Critics praised it, and it launched an entire series of albums of classic film music, including a second volume of Korngold. And more importantly, it caused a resurgence of interest in all of Korngold's music. Within a year, the New York City Opera revived Die Tote Stadt, and many new recordings of Korngold's symphonic and chamber music and all of the operas were produced. Today, Erich Wolfgang Korngold is recognized as one of the last masters of the Romantic idiom, as well as the man who elevated Hollywood film music to powerful, thrilling, symphonic levels.